love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. My very special guest today is Don Casebolt. How are you, Don?
I'm glad to be here. Glad to see you. Glad to have made your acquaintance.
I really enjoyed our chat. We had a chat last week where we kind of were just checking all the technical stuff and roughly what we're going to talk about, and I really enjoyed it. And so I'm looking forward to going deep now with an audience. And welcome everybody that is watching. So good to have many Australians who have stayed up late and looking forward to joining in the conversation in the chat. So welcome to all the Aussies. It's about 1:30-ish here. And those of you watching in the States, how do you like it? I guess it's about 8:30 Pacific time, 11:30, 12:30 lunchtime for some of you. So it's good to have you here as well. So today we're going to chat particularly about some of Don's theses that he has regarding Ellen White, William Miller, etc. And we're going to start off with 3 or 4 of those in a minute. But we're going to chat also about his 2 books, Child of the Apocalypse and Father Miller's Daughter. I have both of these. There's a picture there of Child of the Apocalypse and Ellen G. White. It's a fantastic read. Don, you have absolutely done a great job with that book. It's one of those books you just can't put down. And the same with your second book, Father Miller's Daughter. Incredible work. I encourage everybody to go and look up on your Amazon site, buy both of those books. I bought them on Kindle and they were cheap as chips. So we want to thank you for, releasing those books and giving us so much information to ponder. Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Now, let's begin with some of your thoughts. I know you've got 3 or 4 things you'd like to share and get across. So let's start with those.
All right, we'll start right in.
Yes.
Well, Adventists, I've always said they have the special gift, the gift of prophecy. And there's always been debates about, well, what do we do with this gift? How do we interpret it? Is Ellen White the best expositor of the Bible? Do we only interpret the Bible through the lens of Ellen White? Is she the ultimate authority? I was taught, and just as my background, I went through Adventist primary school, secondary school, college, went to the seminary for about 2 years. So I got what I always assumed was a pretty conventional understanding, and that was that Ellen White basically was the best Bible interpreter and didn't make any mistakes, although it was not claimed that she was infallible literally, but for all practical purposes, she was infallible.
Mm.
And so whatever she put her imprimatur on, sort of when she put her imprimatur on something, that means that was vouchsafed to be directly from God, because after all, what is a prophet? Prophet speaks for God. So when somebody comes along and says they're a prophet, they're speaking for God, or a messenger speaking for God, you got to take that pretty seriously. It's a very high claim.
Exactly.
Then, what does Ellen White say about William Miller? As you can tell from the title of my 2 books, I wrote the first one, Child of the Apocalypse, emphasizing the fact that Ellen White was only 12 years old when she first had her encounter with William Miller's preaching, and she had that encounter very shortly after she had dropped out of her education because she just could not function in a school setting. She tried to go back to a women's seminary, and she was unable to function. About 2 weeks later, she went to a series of meetings by William Miller and became convinced of his teachings. And she would later write about William Miller. She says, I saw, and that I saw is that imprimatur. If she saw it, that means God sent her a picture. I saw that God sent his angel to move upon the heart of a farmer who had not believed the Bible and led him to search the prophecies. Angels of God repeatedly visited that chosen one and guided his mind and opened his understanding to prophecies which had ever been dark to God's people. That is a very strong, high claim with significant words, the chosen one, like the chosen one of God, chosen of Israel, and the fact that God sent his messengers, his angels, repeatedly. So I picture one or more angels coming to Mr. Miller in his study or in his room and giving him information about all these prophecies of Daniel, Revelation, and others. And he wrestled with them, and he came up with ideas that no one else in almost 2,000 years of Christian history had come up with. The question is that true? Is that accurate? Or did Ellen White merely imagine that she saw angels giving these prophecies? Then skipping on over to Mr. Miller's claim, in January of 1843, he published about a 15 or 20 page document where he said that he had discovered 15 proofs that Jesus was coming again that very year. And at the end, after he gave a summary of his 15 proofs, he again repeated at the end, now I've given you these 15 proofs, and those 15 proofs should be ample proof. It cannot be doubted. And he claimed that his method was very literal and common sense. And that's a debatable topic right there. Is what he said in these 15 proofs actually common sense? I'm going to propose that that's not the case. But he claimed that if you listen to God, God would give you the exact and literal accomplishment. And Adventist authorities today hearken back to this and say that Ellen White recommended that Adventists should search the scriptures upon the, quote, the same plan that Father Miller adopted. And I was surprised when I started going through these 15 proofs to see how much they were lacking of common sense. And one of his so-called prophetic periods that I want to use as an illustration comes from the book of Hosea 6, 1 through 3, which says, come, let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten and he will bind us up. After 2 days, and he will revive us. In the 3rd day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know, if we follow on to the Lord, his going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain upon the earth. I would challenge any one of you to now come up with the same interpretation as Mr. Miller did. he said this was a prophecy of both Christ's first and second advent, and that it was literally fulfilled, and that it started, his timeline for this particular prophetic period started in 158 BC and ended in 1842-43 AD. Is there anybody, I don't know if people can chime in back, and it's a two-directional conversation. Is there anybody who would take the challenge of showing how that's a prophecy?
I'll keep an eye on the chat, and if people make a comment about that, I'll bring it onto the screen. It's a little bit different to a normal Zoom session like they have at Adventist Today, where people are in the screen. They're just watching on YouTube, and they can comment in the chat. So it's a different format.
The mental challenge. I personally don't see any prophecy there, literally and exact. But Mr. Miller waxed almost like he's passing out with ecstasy. He says, this prophecy is, quote, one of the richest and most interesting prophecies that was ever delivered to mortals by any prophet since the world began. So that must beat the 2300-day prophecy all out of sorts. Every word speaks and is full of meaning. Every sentence is a volume of instruction. No wisdom of man could communicate as much in as few words. It is a pearl of great price, lying deep in the waters of prophecy. It is a diamond, which will cut the film which covers the visual organs of the readers of God's word. It is a gem in the mountain of God's house, shining into the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. Well, when I first read that, I thought, wow, this guy's really going off the deep end. And not to put too fine a point on it, but when I went through every one of the 15 prophetic periods and the claims, I found that they were not literal and common sense. I couldn't understand how a person could pull a prophecy out of his hat, so to speak, pull a rabbit out of his hat. It didn't make any sense to me at all. But out of those 3 verses, he comes up with the idea that it's clear that this prophecy starts in 158 BC with a treaty that was made between the Romans and the Jews. And then when it says the first day this, the second day this, he says those days it's not the day year principle, it's the day 1,000 years principle. So in this case, your day is worth 1,000 years. So you take 2 of those days, 2,000 years. If you do the math, that brings you up to 1842. So he's got his first prophetic proof that is just as good as the 2300-day prophecy or the 1260-day prophecy, etc. In reality, this passage was written in about 634 BC when Samaria had fallen to the Assyrians. It was an extremely turbulent period with 4 Israelite kings being assassinated in the 15-year period. So Hosea was attacking the injustice, the violence, and the idolatry that happened at that time. But he goes on, and the words early and latter rain, and says that refers to the first and second coming of Christ. Then I will make an explanation. I came down with glaucoma a few months ago, which is a disease which hinders your vision way more than usual, refractory problems. So I have a few notes here, but do have even difficulty reading my own writing or my own printing. So excuse me if I seem to go slowly and stumble on a few of these.
That's fine. We understand.
Now I'm going to give you another example. This is a prophecy which he found in Luke 13:32-33. And I'll read that verse in the Bible. And he said unto them, that is Christ, said unto his disciples, Go ye and tell that fox, Herod, behold, I cast out devils, and I do cure today, which he means 1,000 years, and tomorrow another 1,000 years, and the third day a third 1,000 years, and I shall be perfected. Nevertheless, I must walk today the first 1,000 years, and tomorrow the second 1,000 years, and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. Again, he claims it's clear that this prophecy started in 158 BC with the same treaty that the Jews made with the Romans and lasted up till 1843. And he goes into a lot of detail on he takes single words and pulls a whole lot of specific data to make it fit into his historicism paradigm. And I would say, what evidence do we have that Mr. Miller had any special guidance from God or any special wisdom? I've gone through every single one of these 15 prophecies and other key signs that Adventists have typically used, like the falling of the meteorites in 1833, the dark day, 1780, the Lisbon earthquake, others, and not a single one could I find met any criteria for being a literal, common sense interpretation of the scripture. But this was their claim. They believed that if they used Miller's method, they could not possibly be wrong. And that's why you see in their writings, they claim that they have exact predictions and that they're absolutely certain that they can't be wrong. And this is well illustrated by the phenomena of S.S. Snow. In August 22, 1844, he wrote a document called The True Midnight Cry, Volume 1, Number 1. And he took on people that criticized him for picking a specific day, because people would say to him, how can you say that Christ is going to come on October 22, 1844, when the Bible clearly says you shall not know the day nor the hour? Well, when I first discovered this document about 7 or 8 years ago, I was so shocked that he takes this on directly and says, it doesn't mean that at all. In fact, it means the opposite. It means you will have to know the day and the hour. And you should know, otherwise you'll be lost. And he lists about 15 Bible verses as proof texts And I'm going to read a few of those. First is Daniel 12:10, which says, "Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." Do you get 1844 out of that verse?
No.
Romans 15:4 is his next proof text. And in that he says, "For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. It is by teaching of his word as we are led therein by the Holy Spirit, that we are to understand the time of the coming of our glorious King." Again, I don't see anything that leads me to make any calculations starting sometime BC and ending up exactly 1844. A further proof, Daniel 9:25. "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." Well, that's getting into familiar territory, at least getting into 7-week prophecy. Another one, Ecclesiastes 3:17. "God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and every work under heaven." After he quotes 15 specific scriptures, he then goes to some of the prophetic periods, and one is called the millennial Sabbath. The millennial Sabbath is the idea that the earth is allotted 6,000 years after creation, and then the seventh millennium, the Lord will come, the dead shall be raised, and there'll be the millennium like is spoken of in Revelation. Well, Miller made a calculation that says that the 6,000 year is going to terminate in exactly 1843. The only problem with that is, according to Ussher's chronology, creation happened at 4004 BC, and you can't get that to come out exactly to Miller's calculation. So he rejiggers the genealogies, adds about 150 some years, and says that's a better chronology than Bishop Ussher. So creation happened at 4,157 and is going to end exactly 1843. So that's one of his major proofs in this document. The next major proof is the 7 times of the Gentiles. And he says this started with the captivity of Manasseh, king of Judah, in 677. He calculates that the 7 prophetic times equals 2,520 years. So you take the 677 BC, add 20 years, and again you come out with 1843. But if you look at the events happening on his supposed dates, they're not convincing to me, at least. Then his next one is the 2300 days, which is about the only one which most Adventists recall. Then I will go into the particulars of that. But altogether, he entitles his paper The True Midnight Cry. It was only when he published that in August 22, 1843, that the seventh month movement caught fire and people became convinced that they had an exact date of October 22, 1843. Before that period of time, the Millerites, excuse me a minute, the Millerites only would commit to saying, well, we don't know the day or the hour, but we could know the year, and that's close enough. So that brings me to a few things I'd like to say about Mr. S.S. Snow, who was the father of the Midnight Cry, the author. First of all, a little background on Mr. Snow. He was an atheist, and only in 1839, after being lent a book of prophecy by a relative, he became convinced and converted to the Millerite cause. 1839. He started dedicating his time full time to the cause about a year later and joined a church. But just about the time he was joining the churches, the Millerites were being kicked out of the churches. And so he left the church at that time. But then about maybe 1843 or 44, I forget exactly which, he became consecrated as a Millerite preacher and was given his preaching credentials. Now, this is a person who has had zero theological training, has not studied the biblical languages, has not even read much theology up until this time, and he becomes one of their main authorities, and he produces this document that I've just gone over in brief.
He was quite influential over Miller, wasn't he, as well? Did he become a little bit of like a manager or a booking agent? My understanding is that Snow became very influential in the Millerite movement.
I don't recall that particular fact. What I see is interesting is Ellen White, when she had her first vision in December 1844, she says she looked and she saw the Midnight Cry people. They were going up a very steep and narrow pathway, and they were getting discouraged and saying, maybe God hasn't led us on this path. Maybe we need to go on a different course. And she sees a vision whose basic message is, no, definitely you are on the right path. But even more particular, she says, while praying at the family altar, the Holy Ghost fell upon me, and I seemed to be rising higher and higher above the dark world. I turned to see the people of the world, but could not find them, when a voice said to me, look again and look a little higher. At this, I raised my eyes and saw a street and narrow path cast high up above the world. On this path, the Advent people were traveling to the city, which was at the farther end of the path. They had a bright light set up behind them at the first of the path, which an angel told me was, who can fill in the blank? Who the angel told me was the midnight cry. Now, I'd read that over quite a few times before it dawned on me. Literally what she is saying there is she's seeing the midnight cry, which is S.S. Snow's exposition of his understanding of the message. So in essence, and this bright light, this midnight cry, is coming out of, trying to get my right hand up here, coming out of Jesus' right hand. So that's about as much of an endorsement as can possibly imagine, that she's saying Mr. S.S. Snow's exposition of this is directly from Jesus Christ. So it's got to be right.
Yeah, that's what I'm meaning by his influence.
Yeah, he was a huge influence. Even in the last few months before October 22, 1844, there was getting to be more and more excitement, and the Millerites, basically, they were being charged as being fanatical, but they claimed clear up till October 6, 1844, when Miller and Josiah, what's his name, the publisher,
I don't know.
slips my mind, but the main person behind the campaign to send out all these pamphlets, this is the guy that I'm trying to think of. Maybe it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, Mr. Snow, he came to the idea that you could know the day of the hour. Well, when the Millerites were being charged with teaching a non-biblical, well, when they were charged with preaching the day, knowing the day or the hour, they denied it. And yet it was getting more and more difficult to resist the pull of knowing the exact day or hour. And like I said, Mr. Snow's influential document, The Midnight Cry, explicitly defended knowing the very day and hour. But on January 4, 1843, George Storrs, a prominent Millerite preacher, scandalized the principal Millerite leaders by predicting that Christ was going to come back on April 13, 1843. That was the exact day that the Millerite leadership categorically repudiated. They repudiated George Storrs' endorsement of the exact day and hour, and they put it in their paper saying the brothers Miller, Himes, that's the guy I was thinking of, Himes. Himes is a publisher. Himes, Litch, Hale, Fitch, Hawley, and other prominent lecturers must decidedly protest against fixing the day or the hour of the event. This we have done over and over, with emphasis in italics. We we state this over and over again in the paper. They argued. And they went on to discuss various other dates that it could be, because I think George Knight found about 20 different specific days that various factions of the Millerite movement endorsed as the exact day in that period of time. So it was a very chaotic time. But Ellen White will later, in her books, she says, she recounts the history. She says, when we would try to preach that Christ was coming very soon, the unbelievers would scoff and say, "Oh, you can't know the very day or the hour." And she says they were only using that as a pretext. They weren't sincere in their criticisms. And yet, my point here is all the main leading brethren of the Millerite movement, including Miller, Himes, and all the main preachers that had the endorsement of the movement, they officially repudiated knowing the day until only about 2 or 3 weeks before the day. So it's difficult to take seriously Ellen White's criticism of them retroactively, you might say. And it's so those were the points that I wish to start out.
I'm watching some of the chat, and I don't know if you've come across Kevin Morgan at all. He's an Adventist apologist that is disagreeing with some of the things you're saying in the chat. He's saying them in the chat, and I guess he is looking for some specific things. Can I open the floor to him just to ask a couple of questions to you?
Sure.
So, Kevin, if you're still with us, can you ask a question to Don? He's all ears. I wonder if we could bring him onto the screen. Would you mind if we did that?
I don't have any objection.
Kevin, are you interested in just coming on to the screen? Just it's a bit easier to talk than to follow the chat. Are you open to that if I send you the link, Kevin? I'll just see. That would be good if you didn't mind. So Kevin, I'm just sending you the link in Messenger on Facebook. So why don't you click it and come and join us on the program? Kevin has been on the show before. He's a fan of Ellen G. White, and I think because he believes that Miller's dates were right and something did happen in heaven in 1844, if one is to disagree with Miller, then there needs to be specific proof that she disagreed with specific points. For example, did she disagree with specific dates? And then he would say, I'm guessing, he's not here yet, but he would say that, well, she didn't disagree because it came true. So, Kevin, I'll just post it into the YouTube link as well. Just don't everyone else click it. This is just for Kevin to click. Whereas to me, there was a quote that you wrote in Spectrum, case by Casebolt, William Miller's 2-day prophecy. And I think Ellen says, I saw that God sent his angel to move upon the heart of a farmer who had not believed in the Bible and led him to search the prophecies. Angels of God repeatedly visited that chosen one and guided his mind and opened his understandings to prophecies which had ever been dark to God's people. And William Miller himself, when the Lord didn't return, he said, I was wrong. Whereas Ellen and others reverse engineered the whole thing and said something did happen. So I'm just waiting. Kevin, are you getting the link to join us? We're inviting you to come on. But what's the thoughts of what I've just said there, Don?
Let me just say, I strongly recommend a guy named Kai Arasola, who wrote The End of Historicism and covered a lot of the same points. I believe this was his doctoral dissertation, which he wrote about the 1990, mid-1990s, and which I discovered after I'd already written at least one of my books. I think maybe started on the second one, but he does an excellent job with even better academic documentation.
What's his name again?
Kai Arasola.
Right.
Kai, Kai, and then Arasola, I think it's Arasola.
We've got Kevin joining us, so I'll bring him onto the screen. So we'll let him ask you a couple of questions if you're okay with that. And you don't mind me saying you've just recently been diagnosed also with Parkinson's, which makes it a bit harder for you to be able to communicate with your voice, you were saying, and your eyes. So we really appreciate you being here today with all the challenges that you're facing. Thank you for that, Don. So we're just going to bring Kevin onto the screen. Have you met Kevin before?
No.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Kevin? Nice to see you again.
It's good to see you too, Peter. And I had never, no, we have not spoken. Are you a doctor, Donald?
No, I am a retired nurse practitioner.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you didn't get a doctorate in your studies?
So, Kevin,
No.
let's not go down that kind of path with subtle ad hominem, like
No, I'm not. I just want to know how
suggesting
to
someone
refer,
doesn't know stuff,
I want to refer to him with his
Let's have an
appropriate
honest conversation about what your thoughts are and share
Sure,
some
but
sincere questions.
Is it okay if I just call you Donald? That's what I wanted to know. Okay. Well, the questions that I have are fundamentally about the assumptions that we come to compare what she believes. I've been looking at those statements, and I don't see that she specifically says those 15 are the reason why I believed in the Advent. In fact, I see her accepting it because she's giving a broad sweep of prophecy, and then she said there were additional proofs that he gave. And so I just looked it up this morning. Your work, you've done a lot of work on this, and I have both of your books, and that's my fundamental question, is about how do you ascertain that her endorsement requires that she is endorsing the 15 proofs?
Well, when I look at and read that statement, what I hear her saying is angels are repeatedly coming and opening his mind to prophetic periods and interpretations of prophecies that have never been closed to God's people. Mm-hmm. It's like he has some new, exciting thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I discovered was, particularly reading Froome's book, The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, he went over 2,000 years of history and showed, well, I'm going to interrupt my own thought and say, we've been taught that Mr. Miller put aside all commentaries any human influences and just use a concordance in the Bible himself. If you read Mr. Miller, you'll find that he followed in the line of historicism on all these prophecies. And to me, when she says she saw angels giving him insight into the prophecies, she's including all these prophecies, and to me it doesn't make sense to say, well, God gave him through his angels understanding of the 2300-day prophecy and the other 14. She's not endorsing because she doesn't explicitly mention them, but that those are clearly all wrong. So I would just say I would like to see any proof that any of the other 14 leave out the 2300-day prophecy, show how any of the other 14 could be correct. I think.
Okay. Well, I found in your work the part that seemed more convincing and more that it kind of had me thinking a little bit more is the methodology that he used and many of them used, which was to look at parables and apply parables to try to understand the return of Christ. That's very strong in the evidence. They use the virgins, they use, a number of parables that speak to them. But it seems like it's not exclusively in that way. I would say after the disappointment, they used it even more so, trying to explain things. I don't know if you, in any of your research, looked into the Jubilee Standard, but that's the other shut door Adventists, their publication, and it only lasted for a few months. And they definitely will try this parable and try to apply that parable and to come up with some kind of an idea because they believed it had to be soon. I think you're right about that. They were definitely in that sense. But it doesn't seem like to me that the date was essential as the event, that their commitment that Christ is coming soon was a cumulative effect, not just on the 15 proofs. The 15 proofs don't seem to rise within their discussions. When James White reviews the earlier Adventist positions, he doesn't revive the 15 positions. So it seems to me that there's more of a general sense that she is endorsing Miller. Her statement is describing the fact that he was a farmer who didn't have interest in the Bible, and that the angels led him to study the Bible, and that his method was to compare scripture with scripture rather than to go to the commentaries per se, but to let the scriptures explain themselves better, and that is the portion of his message that she is endorsing. And if we limit it to that degree, and we still see that he was a man studying the scriptures, trying to understand it. Some have tried to call him a prophet, but he never claimed that he had divine revelations that told him. He just said, this is what I find in the scriptures. One other point that I would like to make, and I know I'm kind of dominating here, but that is that I really wanted to understand this because your point of view is that she is Miller's daughter, therefore his views must be her views. And so I wanted to know what his views were after the disappointment. And I began to read, and I've been collecting his statements. And many have said that he rejected his whole premise. And what I find is not that at all. I find that he is just baffled because he said, I thought I had it right. It's not that he rejects it. It's just that it didn't work out and he doesn't understand why. And I find that in his letters.
Parentheses. What I would like to know, when I observed all these 15 different proofs and the other scriptures that were taken out of context, the Millerites always emphasized exactitude. They thought they had it down to the exact day and the exact hour as they got closer to it. They made a big point. It was like they had an atomic clock that was counting down to the milliseconds. They even used not just the day, year, but they calculated if they mentioned an hour, that was like 1/24th of a year. And so it wasn't just that Christ was coming soon, it was he's coming soon on the time clock that was so precise. And this is one of the proofs of the divinity of their message, is only God could be so exact. And after the disappointment, the whole thing was destroyed. Go ahead. I can't hear.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, let me just put one other question I'd like to know the answer to. What did you think of the two examples I gave of the 1,000 year is a day in Hosea and in Luke? Does those seem like legitimate, good way of interpreting?
Not probably. Actually, I have not gone into the proofs very much myself. I think he adds it in kind of, well, while I'm here, I'm going to throw one more in, kind of thing, because the periods of time that are repeated are the period of the 1260 days, which is repeated 7 different ways in Daniel and in Revelation. And even in the expositions that I found in the Jubilee Standard, they were referring back to that one. And that one seemed very clear. The 2300 days seemed very clear. Then there's some other periods there in 30 extra days in Daniel that they work out to come out pretty much in the same time frame. So those are the ones that they continue to repeat. Some of the other ones don't seem to be as essential. I think it works this way as I've seen it, even in my own work, which is why I prefer that I have somebody who doesn't agree with me to read something that I've written, because the people who agree with me are not very careful. They may just nod their head, yeah, that's good. And I think that's what they were doing. They were just nodding their heads. Yeah, okay, that's good. They're not being critical of it. And when there were people that argued with Miller, like Dowling, his point of view was not that Miller's numbers were off on the 2300 days. He disagreed with his interpretation and about what it could mean. So he didn't disagree with the figures on the 2300 days. So there's some nuance to this. There are things that she agrees with very clearly and she repeats them, and there are other things that she doesn't. So if we spend all our time on those things that she doesn't mention again, I don't know that is a solid basis for determining what she really agreed with, because she doesn't repeat it again. But the things that she does repeat are pretty clearly what she agrees with.
Let me ask you another question. What I observed about the 1260-day prophecy is, if you take Froome's work, and which he starts back all the times that the 1260-day prophecy is mentioned, and the earliest expositions of those, say in 200 or 300 AD, they, for the first several hundred years, they had no idea, and Froome emphasizes this, they thought that Christ was coming back so soon that they couldn't even conceive of a long period of time of 2300 days or 1260 days. And so they didn't have any of this day-year stuff until about 1,000 years into the time frame. And if you take the commonest understanding now of the 1260 days going from 538 to 1798, what I discovered was nobody came up with predicting the 538 to 1798 until 1798, which hardly makes it a prophecy because the time's already up. And he has about 100 authors on his chart, and they have proposed, I would estimate, about all with supposed key events happening at the beginning date and on the end date. I just took a few things around the supposed end date, 1798, and again, I'm going to emphasize you didn't find any that had the 538 to 1798 until one lonely guy after it was 1798 suggested that the captivity of the Pope in that age be considered the end. And then they just calculated backwards 1260 and landed at 538. And they hunted and pecked around and tried to find something in 538 that would justify them picking that as a significant date to begin it. And it's completely arbitrary. In essence, what they do is say that when the Eastern Emperor from Byzantine to Constantinople sent his troops in and kicked out the Arian Goths, that was when the Pope at that point in time could become supreme. Well, I point out that in 538, there was several years of battling going back and forth, so the control over Rome alternated several times during that time period. And also the Pope was a lapdog to the Eastern Emperor. He was persecuted, was forced to change his theological opinions from pillar to post multiple times, was taken into exile, was said not to be infallible, they even had popes being anathematized and excommunicated, causing them problems clear down to 1870 when the Pope was officially determined to be infallible and when he spoke ex cathedra. So how is it if something happened significant in 538 to 1798, how come we have 100 people that disagreed with those dates and thought they had something happening at those dates? And there's just as many ridiculous things happening in 1798. That was Pope Pius VI. Well, Napoleon got tired of Pope Pius VI, got rid of him. They got a new pope in, got tired of him within a few years, took him into captivity, and that pope himself says he was put under a more strict and rigorous imprisonment than Pope Pius VI. So why not choose Pope Pius VII? In brief, without going into any more details.
Yeah.
Completely arbitrary.
History is very complex when you look at it. Prophecy is kind of punctuated, and because it wants, not everybody can follow the details, but the prophecies are big outlines. Like we go through Daniel gives us these big outlines of these empires, and they line up quite well. But when you look at it more under a microscope, you're going to see there's far more complexity to it. I think prophecy is best understood after it's been fulfilled, because the disciples, the Jews, weren't anticipating Jesus exactly as it was fulfilled. But then on the day of his resurrection, he took them through the scriptures and showed how it had been fulfilled. So I think we get better vision in hindsight. And so I'm not troubled by that prophecy is better understood when it's fulfilled.
It's not very impressive to make predictions after the fact. In fact, it's self-contradictory. But I know there's some people who think it's impressive to have a prophecy that happened. And then,
well, how many of the prophecies regarding Jesus did they understand at the time? And how many did they understand in reflection?
well, I would
I
just
think
say
Yeah.
my answer to that is, if you look in the Old Testament, the word Messiah occurs 29 times. And in every single case, it does not apply to Jesus. The only ambiguous case is in Daniel 9.
Mhm.
And we fault the disciples for not understanding, and we fault the Jews for not understanding. But you go back, you couldn't predict. There was no such thing as a suffering servant. There's supposed prophecies of Christ, like the virgin birth. And what is it, Isaiah 14, where a virgin birth is
A young woman.
but it was actually talking about a birth happening in the prophet's time. It wasn't predicting Jesus.
But Matthew applies it.
Well, you can take all the Old Testament verses that are quoted in the New Testament, and they're not very convincing for applying to Jesus. They're rabbinic types of. They're not predictions like we would understand predictions today.
Yeah, for sure. I went to a display of the Dead Sea Scrolls and was interested in the literature that they had on display about the views that they had of the Messiah. And as you study it, you can look into Edersheim, you can look into some of the other more scholarly works on the time period. You'll see that they had many different views. So they weren't anticipating because they had different views. And in fact, in the Gospels, their view is that he's coming to help them with Rome, not to help them with sin, not to redeem them from sin. So human conceptions, humans' interpretations may be off.
That is the authentic, original interpretation of those so-called prophecies. If Muslim,
Peter's asking us if we can shift, and I just wanted to ask one more question before I go off, and this doesn't have to do with your books. It has to do with Veltman's study. I noticed Casebolt, who was on the reading staff during that time, and I wondered if it was you.
it was me. I didn't stay with it very long because I didn't think they were handling it in an efficient way. And I didn't want to take my time in pursuing something that I didn't think was, I couldn't spend the amount of time. I think by the time, it took about 5 or 6 years, and then the General Conference never got that information out to the general public. If anything, press the findings. It was kind of going through an exercise of making a defense without.
So how did you happen to join that?
Well, he had heard through the pipeline. In the Greater Adventist community, I think I was a student of Dr. Don McAdams.
Okay.
And when they were doing, particularly Dr. McAdams did his thing at Hassan Jerome, I was given copies of that. And I decided while I was doing my graduate work at University of Chicago, that I would see what Ellen White's use of common historians on the Walden disease that I discovered she copied from, I think it was Wiley, and I put that in. And anyway, to answer one of your earlier questions of a half an hour ago, one of the reasons that I never finished my doctoral program is I could see that my views were diverging more and more from the Orthodox views, and my hope of teaching Semitic languages at an Adventist institution is I could see the Hackett's and Pearsons of the world ruled the roost and putting lots of pressure on anybody with modern views of scholarship. I could see that probably I was not going to be able to fit into that, and I decided to cut my losses and take up nurse practitioner and turn my living as I was becoming a father for the first time, and I could see I didn't have a very solid economic foundation. I'd probably be kicked off the staff for speaking my views, so I dropped out.
Mm. Hey, thank you, Kevin, for coming on the program, and I hope you appreciated getting a chance to chat to Don himself. We'll get you back on the show in a couple of weeks, and
Nice.
Good to meet you.
yeah, so we'll boot you off for now, but thanks for joining us, and always enjoy your calm approach. Thank you very much. So, Don, that's interesting. I didn't realize that you had been involved with the Fred Veltman study there on Desire of Ages. When you say you didn't stay very long with it, how long did you go to some of the... Sorry, you're back on now.
I published an article on the trumpets of Revelation. I think it's the fifth or sixth seal, and this whole idea that they predicted the fall of the Ottoman Empire on August 11th, 1840 is a well-known one, and that supposedly stirred up a bunch of enthusiasm. It was a big proof. 1840 was a proof of 1840. 1844, I thought that was a much more worthwhile approach, and it's going to prove stuff rather than just some statistic on common parallel writings.
And you're right. I mean, it was an 8-year project, and what I found interesting with the 2.5-page summary versus the $2,500 page report, I found it difficult to understand Fred Veltman's reasoning. He on the one hand was revealing so much, but on the other hand trying to kind of talk it down as well. What do you think's going on in his mind with a lot of that kind of reporting?
All I know is it looked like to me that he's kind of saying, well, if only 20% was copied or influenced or whatever, that's leads you to one conclusion versus 80%. And I didn't think that was the right metric to judge it by. I saw, for example, with the Waldenses, Ellen White adds to what Wiley says, and she claims they were Sabbath keepers.
Yeah.
Well, and from the time I wrote my original findings, including the fact that they weren't Sabbath keepers, even though she said they were, and in the mid-80s, I wrote something more recently on the same topic, and in that interim of about 30 years, there's even more evidence that shows that they weren't Sabbath keepers, but yet the same apologists, and I mentioned this to you, I think, before, they they claimed that the Waldenses were Sabbath keepers, and basing this on the fact that they only kept regular Sundays and didn't keep a lot of the other holidays of the Catholic Church. And the Andrews University Studies published a book by one well-known conservative Adventist where he basically argued that because they only kept regular Sundays that they were Sabbath keepers, which sounds completely preposterous and is preposterous. But that was their reasoning. I can't even hardly imagine just describing. Doesn't it sound preposterous to anybody there that Sunday keeping on regular Sundays would be some evidence of Sabbath keeping?
Yeah, exactly.
And to me, it's not to argue that Sabbath keeping is not biblical. To me, that's a whole different question. I would say there's good Old Testament and New Testament reasons to keep the Sabbath, but the historiography of Sabbath keeping, we kind of blamed the popes after Constantine for Sunday keeping, but there were persons that retrospectively we call popes that were martyred in the years before Constantine took over the Roman Empire, and there was Sunday keeping much earlier than Constantine.
Mm.
And that's, you can find that even in early Adventist literature by Preble and Bates. They recognized that there were Christians keeping Sunday. So the origins of Sunday keeping are much more obscure than at Constantine's decree in 313. Suddenly that changed the church from Sabbath keeping to Sunday keeping.
Did you know Bakioki? Did you read any of his material?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I criticized Bakioki's stuff. It's in my second book, a critique of, well, it's sort of a review of Adventist scholarship on Saturday versus Sunday in general, because of course there have been collective Adventist works over decades on that subject, where they talk about Sunday in Asia or Sunday in Europe, Sunday and Saturday in various geographic regions of the world. Let's say the Ethiopic Church, there's Sunday keeping even outside of countries that are under Roman domination, or Sunday or we have a myopic focus on only the Western Protestants versus Catholics in Western. We don't talk about the Greek Orthodox or the Ethiopic Orthodox. So how did Sunday appear in those contexts that wasn't under the influence of just the Pope, is what I'm basically trying to say.
Mm.
Pope that had no authority, was not recognized as an authority by the Eastern Russian or Greek Orthodox or the Coptic Christians either. So how do you explain Sunday coming into them if it's only supposedly just due to the Pope and to Catholics?
When you were a young Adventist, what took, I'm guessing that you were probably more a traditional Adventist when you were just young and growing up, and that's what you were exposed to. What were some of the influences that led you away from that more traditional view to the more progressive view that you took on later, and put you in the sights of people like Fred Veltman and I guess, examples would be Don McAdams teaching you. What was there a transition period where you went from a full Adventist believer and in love with Ellen White and her visions, and you took it all on board as a young person? What were the cracks that began your questioning, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, I grew up in Roseburg, Oregon, which is a fairly small town in southwestern Oregon, and I went to a Bilo Academy, which they built out in the national forest. You might say, out in the sticks. We weren't allowed to have radios or any music. It was kind of getting away from the cities, and very conservative. And so until I was 18, I was only exposed to very traditional views, and I didn't even know the rest of the world existed, you might say. But one of my teachers at Milo Academy suggested that I, instead of going to Walla Walla College or PUC on the West Coast, that I go to Andrews. So I did choose to go there. I didn't know a single person in Andrews. I was assigned a roommate who also didn't have anybody that he, personally wanted to room with. And I was part of an honors program that had classes and seminars that were supposed to be in enrichment. And I guess I would say at that point I was introduced to the concept of critical thinking or objective reasoning and being informed of all sides of an argument, and being informed also that there was a bigger world out there than just what I was exposed to as a 14 or 15-year-old at the Bible Academy. At that time, I wasn't aware of it so much at the time, but in retrospect, I found out there were groups in the Adventist academia, you might say, that had an idea of a university being a place where there was more freedom of expression and you couldn't be kicked out for expressing an unpopular, untraditional point of view. And for example, I went on a Heshbon expedition in 1976 after going back to the seminary at Andrews University. And one of the persons who was supposed to be on the dig was James Cox, who was the head of the New Testament department at the seminary. And at the last minute, he was not allowed to go. And that was because Elder Pearson, the president of the General Conference, had heard that Dr. Cox doubted the Pauline authorship of the book of Hebrews. And there were other things like that.
And he was sent out here to Australia.
Pardon me?
James Cox was sent out here to Australia and presided over Avondale College for a while.
And Dr. McAdams was sent to Keene, Texas to head up that college. And Larry Garrity, the La Sierra. Yeah, so anyway, I thought if they're going to be prosecuting Dr. Cox for that type of a belief, what chance do I have when and I found out, especially when I found out that Martin Luther himself doubted the Pauline authorship of the book of Hebrews. So I thought, well, can't be that bad. And
tell us your long hair story. I liked when you shared that one with me off air.
well, I mentioned that in the little town of Roseburg, my dad was a surgeon, and as such, probably generated some good tithe receipts. And he was a professional person, so he ended up being the chairman of the building committee for the Roseburg Junior Academy Elementary School, as well as the chairman of the building committee for the remodeling, not the total new construction of a new church. And I recall going out doing free labor on many Sundays with my dad, and also memorizing my memory verses and my lesson and all that. And so I was the first male baptized in the new church building, and was sort of a golden child, you might say, very popular. When I went back to Andrews University, one thing, the Students for a Democratic Society was protesting the Vietnam War. They were a very radical group. Much to my surprise, one of them gave a talk in the Andrews University men's chapel in the men's dorm, and he pulled out a cigarette and started smoking, which shocked me all to death. And then they had the Democratic Convention in Chicago, not that far away, and the police had a riot, beat up all the Democratic protesters and all the peace sticks, which shocked me, and I purchased a book. There was a pictorial rendition of all the happenings where the police were beating all the students and the protesters. And since my draft number was 31, I was vitally interested in the topic. And there was a group of males at the university that, instead of sort of automatically endorsing the Adventists as going to join the army, but as medics and not carry a gun, they, which influenced me, put in for a conscientious objector that said I didn't want to be a medic either. So I was exposed and contributed to a more liberal point of view, even at an Adventist campus. We had our own little anti-war protests. And anyway, I decided, well, everybody likes me pretty well with my short hair, but if I were to grow long hair, I wonder what they would do. Well,
That's exactly why I grew my hair long when I was young.
So I grew my hair young, and I fell afoul of the rules that said you had to have it above your ear or some such thing. And I was reprimanded by the president of Andrews University, Hamill. And yet it was only about 20 years later when I and my dad ended up going on a geological field trip sponsored by Adventist Forums or Spectrum with Elder Hamill. And I realized that Dr. Hamill was more liberal than I'd imagined him to be. He didn't believe in the 6,000 year theory, but he was trying to make it an Adventist university with values of a university, but he was under the gun from Elder Hackett, whose name reminded me of the word hatchet, and Pearson, who I thought was a reactionary. But unbeknownst to me, Dr. Hamill had wrote to my dad and said something to the effect of, you need to get your son in line, otherwise there may be bad consequences. my dad wrote back, and my dad never told me that he wrote this back. I didn't know that he wrote back till 20 years later. He had somehow seen a picture of Ted Wilson, Neil Wilson's son, who is about a year or two ahead of me. But he had, according to my dad anyway, because I never saw the picture myself, just as long a hair as I did. So he said, when you can get the General Conference president's son to cut his hair, I'll instruct my son to cut his hair. So
I like it.
of course, I thought, why are they majoring in minors?
Mm,
Yeah, that's my long hair story.
I like it. So tell me about some people that were kind of around at the time. Like we've talked about McAdams, we've talked about Trenchard, or that might have been off air. We chatted about Warren Trenchard. Maybe give us some thoughts on him. Also, Raymond Cottrell. Did you get to meet him?
No, I never met him. I just read several of his contributions to. He wrote some really long thing on issues in Daniel. I know I read
Because Ray Cottrell and Des Ford seemed to be saying equally controversial things, but Ray was able to kind of fly under the radar a bit more than Des Ford. Why do you think that was?
Well, I don't think I have any insights into that. I just know that it was about the time I was sort of dropping out and I was writing. Well, to back up briefly, like I said, Dr. McAdams was a professor of mine, and I think I took Western Civ and honors in history from him and maybe one other class. And so when he was writing a comparative study on Huss and Jerome and Ellen White's use of Protestant historians who weren't as accurate, I determined to write my own. And then as I shared those with different people, I guess the main influence in retrospect was I realized that my views were differing more and more from the average orthodoxy, and I was being looked at with different sets of eyes. And
you were potentially becoming a target, maybe.
Right.
So you knew Fred Veltman. Did you meet Walter Ray?
I never did meet him in person, but it's like when his book came out, or when Ron Dunbar's book on Prophetess of Hell came out, I was working in the seminary bookstore at Andrews University, and it's like you could only get it if you could come to the back room and give us a special code. But they were writing it, and I was seeing Walter Ray writing stuff, and Feldman writing stuff, McAdams writing stuff, and I just thought, I better hurry up and get writing my own stuff, otherwise all the good stuff is going to be gone before I get there.
What about Ron Numbers? Did you get to meet him?
I had one class in history for Ron Numbers. Yes.
That's interesting. What about Ron Graybill?
Ron Graybill, I did meet on a couple of his tours as, I guess, Assistant Secretary of the White Estate. He was supposed to be kind of checking out the latest in critical scholarship and suggesting most successful defenses of the faith as understood, which reminds me of one thing I wanted to say, and that is the White Estate, both 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, as well as at the current time, I think the family connections make it too difficult for them to be objective and be reasonable minded. Plus, just coming from a different generation with different worldview and not being very educated in modern scholarship, historical, on I'm not talking about just SDA history, but world history and becoming generally educated person, which I credit Andrews University with helping me become an educated, knowledgeable person in the 21st century. But it's like I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that Ted Wilson never reads a book outside of the Bible and Ellen White books. Well, if that's the only books you subject yourself to, you'll have a very different view of the world.
Mm. Mm. And you knew Ted Wilson?
Yeah, I was student association president my senior year at Andrews University undergraduate school, and partway through the year, our treasurer dropped out, and Ted Wilson, who was actually at the seminary, volunteered himself, and nobody else wanted the position or whatever. I forget exactly the details, but anyway, he was the treasurer. So for all the meetings with the student officers, he was there, and that's how I got to know him. He was treasurer, and at the time, I thought he was a moderate type of a person, reasonable person, but after years of holding general conference posts and being exposed to third world education instead of first world education, he's become a different person mentally, I think.
Did you know Heppenstall?
No, I didn't.
Did you meet Des Ford?
No, I don't recall ever meeting him.
What did you think of Glacier View after it had become clear that it was really just a kangaroo court to defrock Des? What were your thoughts as that became?
It coincided exactly with I had about two years of my doctoral program, and I was coming to the conclusion that there wasn't any place in the church for me. So I had dropped out, was scouting around to determine what I should do to make a living, and also what should I do with these discoveries that I had made on Ellen White and the Walden Seas, Ellen White and the Sabbath, Ellen White and the Shut Door, all these areas where I was convinced, maybe I couldn't prove it to somebody else, but I was convinced in my own mind that the general understanding of a relationship with her was that, well, somehow she didn't copy all these historians because they had every single clue right. It was just sort of handy for her to use them. They had felicitous language, which she put to use, but she wasn't really endorsing them. Anyway, the defense which the church was making of their bureaucracy as well as Ellen White, that was one more reason for me to conclude I better find a separate pathway and decide to try to earn my living as a nurse and as a nurse practitioner rather than learning a bunch of dead languages. When people ask me what I did for a number of years, I'd say I studied dead languages.
When I read this book, Child of the Apocalypse, your incredible book, I think released in 2021, and then followed the year after by your other book, Father Miller's Daughter, it really occurred to me that you probably could have written those books in 1984. You probably had a lot of that knowledge already. And I guess from what you're saying, I'm guessing that you went, look, I'm watching all my friends get shifted off to Australia and other parts of the States, McAdams here and there, and Warren Trenchard in some ways. I think he was ostracized. Your Ron Numbers, John Butlers, all these guys that seem to speak up and just ask simple questions were suppressed, marginalized, cancelled, or shipped off somewhere. So I can see why you thought, yeah, I'm just going to find something that I enjoy doing, and you maybe spent the next 20 years as a more of a cultural Adventist, less than stirring the pot. Though in that time period, you were writing for Spectrum and Adventist Today, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No,
Why did you leave these two books that I've just mentioned, your Child of the Apocalypse and Father Miller's Daughter? Why did you leave them until the early 2000s?
well, one thing I wanted to emphasize, this doesn't answer your question directly, but it's important, and that is, if you take a look at all my sources for both of those books, they all come from sources friendly to Ellen White.
Yes.
They're not jobs, they're not from opponents. It was there all the time waiting for any conservative or scholars that were more orthodox in their opinion. Just the fact that Ellen White was a child, I just emphasized what I already knew, that she was only 8 or 9 years old when her life changed. She had this rock that struck her in her temporal area of her brain. It about killed her. She was in a coma for 3-4 weeks, not even able to eat. She lost down to skeletal weight. By that I mean like somebody in Auschwitz. And when she finally recovered, she tried to go back to school because she was a great scholar. She was the teacher's special assistant, helping poorer students, lesser students with their homework. She was quite ambitious, but she just couldn't physically hack it. So she struggled along for about 2 years. And she tried to go back to school one more time, but she describes herself as shaky, sweating great drops of not blood, but sweat, and not being able to attend school again and dropping out a second time. And within 2 weeks time of dropping out of school and arriving at the age of 12, she is exposed to Mr. Miller's preaching, and not only Mr. Miller's preaching, but William Foster Foy, the black preacher who basically had these slaying in the. He had visions and had times when he was unconscious. Supposedly his heart and his breath stopped for 4 to 8 hours, and he was seeing sights of heaven like she later saw. And this was within 2 weeks of Miller's second visit to Portland, where she was exposed again, and she is becoming a Millerite and was baptized. No sooner is she baptized when she's excommunicated from their church. And all this is happening when she's like 14 years old.
Yeah.
say to myself, what kind of spiritual maturity and critical thinking is this 12, 13-year-old child? What tools does she have to know whether Miller is right or wrong? There's been enthusiastic movements and millennial movements by the scores going down through history for 1,000 years. And they all come up with some idea that proves that Christ is going to be coming back, and then he doesn't. And my conclusion is she's simply wrong, and that the church has never wanted to admit it, and she is not so much not wanted to admit it, but I don't think she was capable of seeing where she was wrong. Whenever she was tempted to think, well, no, this is not God that's moving upon me and making me want to prophesy and fall down and give these messages to the world. She has these attacks of involuntary aphasia, where she's struck dumb and made to feel like if she doubts her experience, she's going to go to hell. And then she's surrounded by all these people who are isolated from their general American culture and are isolated in small little groups that believe that there's 15 different proofs, and they don't study as much as our friend, I forgot his name, that came on and asked me questions.
Evan Morgan.
They didn't have the time or the education to make a critical evaluation of this phenomena. It was just so exciting to them. And so it's like, isn't it knockdown evidence? We have 15 ways of proving that Jesus is coming again on this date. And if you don't believe it, you're going to fry in hell, which was basically their message. You're only 12, 13, 14 years old. You're going to pretty well come to the same conclusion as your small, isolated group, given all those physical and psychological and sociological surroundings. So don't judge the poor woman or the poor girl too harshly. She did the best that she could, and in my judgment, the rest of her life she was a very dedicated person trying to save persons to Christ, and very evangelistic oriented. Started lots of churches and hospitals and educational institutions, and the world is a better place for her, having lived. Personally, I still donate money to various Adventist charitable works that I can support, even though I might disagree with their fundamental belief on Ellen White, which, by the way, I found out. And the fundamental beliefs, Ellen White's name is not specifically mentioned in the spiritual gifts section until 1950. And it was only then where they said, and we take Ellen White as the mark of having the gift of prophecy in the final God's remnant church. And I think we've made too much of a god or a divine symbol. It's like the snake they held up when you get bitten by a snake in the wilderness. They had this snake image they held up, and they were healed. And they kept that snake image around for centuries, and until they decided it had become an idol and got rid of it. A couple hundred years later, some king of Israel got rid of the snake.
I wonder if we can have a 5-minute break, and then I want to come back with about 5 or 6 rapid fire questions, and then we'll close it out for the day, for the evening. Would that be all right? We'll have a quick 5-minute break, And then I just want to ask you some quick questions. I asked Rainda Bruinsma the same round of questions, and they were all done in 15, 20 minutes. So
Good. I'm worn out, so I'm looking forward to rapid.
it'll be rapid fire. So quick toilet break, everybody. And I'm chatting with Don Casebolt. We will be right back.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
And we're back, and I'm chatting with Don Casebolt, and we're going to let him go very soon. Really appreciate you taking the time, Don. I've had a dream of having you on the program for a couple of years now, and so it's a real dream come true to have you on the program. I just want to again point out your 2 excellent books, and I encourage everybody to go and buy these books on your own Amazon site, Child of the Apocalypse, Ellen G. White, and Father Miller's Daughter. I remember when I read Father Miller's Daughter, I'll just bring it up onto the screen. I have the Kindle version. Excuse me. Let me see if I can read that a bit clearer. And on the Kindle, you can. Sorry, there we go. On the Kindle. Sorry, I've just lost it after all of that. Give me one moment.
You're looking for a citation from Child of
It-
Apocalypse?
It's one that I had brought up on the screen and then it disappeared on me.
Do you know what
Um,
page? I have
It was in the preface, and I literally had highlighted it, and it came up on the screen, and then when I shared it, it disappeared. Give me a moment, I will find it. Ah, dear. Yeah, here we go. So this is in the preface. I think you can see it a little bit on the screen there.
I mean, I can see it, but I can't read it.
Yeah, I'll read it out to everybody. When I read this, this was in the Child of the Apocalypse, the first book that I bought, 2021. And I remember thinking, wow, if I had read even the preface 20 years ago, I would have been shocked and amazed and probably left the church. A few people in the comments have written that they've bought your books, read the books, and left the Adventist church because of your books. I want to come to that in a moment. I'll just read this paragraph. Ellen Harmon White, the Child of the Apocalypse, Father Miller's Daughter, was tattooed by Miller's message and method. And due to her untiring efforts, both Miller's message and method have been tattooed into the DNA of SDA theology. For example, despite the fact that the Ottoman Empire never collapsed on August 11, 1840, as predicted by the Millerites, Ellen G. White asserts that it did. About 20 similar erroneous eschatological interpretations still saturate SDA theology. These originated in pre-Miller sources. Miller inherited them, Ellen Harmon inherited them from Miller, and SDA thought leaders inherited them from Ellen Harmon White. Currently, the SDA Church feels constrained to support such interpretations. This is the line that gets me, because Ellen G. White asserted that her visions confirmed that such erroneous interpretations were divinely endorsed. It's tattooed indelibly. The way you write is just incredible. And I remember thinking, I'm going to do a show and I'm just going to read the preface, the introduction, and chapter 1. And people are going to just be saying, right, I have to leave the church. That is just, Ellen White is a false prophet. When you get feedback, and there's been several in the chat tonight that people have bought your book and left the church, how does that make you feel? Because you just spoke quite highly of Ellen and what she's done, and Kevin Morgan, who was on earlier asking you questions, he also loves Ellen and what she's done and has fond memories of her when he was a boy. You know, his mother raising him on many of the writings of Ellen White. How do you feel when your book has it influenced people to leave the Adventist church that you've stayed?
Well, I would just say the Adventist church has in many areas majored in minors, in my opinion. And just for one other illustration, the whole idea of women's role in the church the official church position differs completely from my own idea,
Yeah.
portable, but it's not just Ellen White, it's the Bible. If you're familiar with the story about, there's a, I forget, I think it's Numbers 5, chapter 5. There's a situation where if a man suspects that his wife has been unfaithful and gone out and had sex with other men, that he can find out whether his suspicions are valid or not. He's ordered to bring his wife to the priest at the door of the tent, and they go through this ritual where the priest reads some sort of curses over ashes, or burns the paper, and the curses are there, and the woman has to drink this potion, and supposedly, if she's innocent, the potion won't harm her, but if she's guilty, then it's supposed to like rot her outside. She's supposed to have a spontaneous abortion or something like this. And I think, is the God of the universe, is that really the way things would really happen that way? I don't believe that at all.
No.
And then of course, as the gay issues come up, and then the Bible, do we reinterpret, so all the, what do they call them, slugging, all the quotations where it's like, "I'll kill them," and there's a certain school that says, well, when the Old Testament and New Testament writers wrote these things, they weren't really talking about homosexuality. They were talking about something else, something related to sexuality, but not really sexuality. And so there's those that basically say, well, if the Bible says it, like in these two instances about homosexuality and about curses being an effective way to determine whether your wife has been loyal to you or not. First of all, in my unscientific experience, it's more the men that probably need to drink the bad potions. The women should bring their men to the door of the temple and see if they should drink the potion. But my thought world is the age of the earth. That's another thing. There's multiple areas where I'm completely changed, but I don't feel like going to any other church because I have disagreements with them. So my church going is pretty well limited to going to Zoom Sabbath schools, places, and discussing issues of mutual interest. But I'm just a different. And then I look at my kids. My oldest daughter was born on Halloween Day when she was going to the Adventist church school and church. Some person said, well, your birthday is when the devil has his birthday. Different instances like that.
Crazy.
Go ahead. You wanted to say something?
No, I was just saying it's crazy. Now, I've got my questions, but to save you time, because I know, you've had some health issues recently, I'm just going to cut them down to four quick questions, and just give us your quick answers if you like. So one thing, and I've just written them down, so I'm going to read them just so I don't get sidetracked. One thing I've always appreciated about your work is that you don't just critique Ellen White's health teachings or plagiarism issues, etc. You go right back to the foundations. If William Miller's prophetic prophetic methodology was fundamentally flawed, as you argue, why doesn't that undermine the very reason Adventism came into existence?
Well, you got me beat on that. I'm not sure how to even start to. I'm not sure what. If you had a multiple choice, give me a multiple choice question. I don't understand the question.
Well, I guess when you look at Luther, for example, Martin Luther, and you realize that there's some things he wrote and said that, you know, could shake some of your belief in him as a person, you're able to separate it because you get to go, well, I'm going to look at his content. Some I'll agree with, some I won't. But because Ellen White's claims are based on exactly what I just read from your book, so saith the Lord kind of approach, that is based on the methodology of Miller, is saturated into Ellen White, into the DNA, because of Luther. You could say, okay, well, he was flawed. He wasn't claiming that these messages came from God, so you can take or leave some things. But with Ellen White, the fundamental thing she is saying and the methodology she is following is false and inaccurate beyond a human flaw, because she's claiming it came from God. I guess I'm asking, how can that not, I'll quote you, currently the SDA Church feels constrained to support such interpretations because Ellen G. White asserted that her visions confirmed these interpretations.
I'll try to answer it as best as I understand the question. Well, I would say that, like I mentioned, there's been these millennial movements for the last 2,000 years, and they're all based on some biblical interpretation that is completely wrong-headed, despite the fact of being told you won't know the day and the hour. Somehow they got it backwards and insisted they would know the day and the hour. Well, my way of thinking, even now, it's not too late to just say, we made a big mistake and we were wrong. The Adventist Church, or the pre-Adventist Church, because the Adventist Church didn't come into being until about 20 years after the Great Disappointment. And the Great Disappointment, the Millerite movement was wrong, and so was Ellen White, and so was the Adventist Church on this matter that supposedly, well, I mean, we're still trying to, we're still trying to say that the second coming is imminent, because that's what the initial reaction is, well, we may be wrong about this date, but Christ is still coming at first of all, in a couple more weeks, then it was a couple more months, then it was a couple more years, and then it was a couple of decades. And you had these stories about Ellen White saying, somebody in this picture is not going to die before.
Yeah.
And they did. It's just overwhelming evidence. Might as well drop that idea and say it doesn't make any difference when he's going to come, whether it's 1,000 years or 200,000 years or 1,000,000 years.
I guess my question is saying, why doesn't that undermine the very reason for Adventism? So, if I was a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness or a Christian Scientist, if these things were exposed to me as you have exposed them in your work, to me it undermines it so much. And I know the church is never going to admit that they were wrong. For me personally, it makes it harder for me And I left the church 10 years ago, of course, but that's why, because it was so undermined, I couldn't put my name to it. I'm interested in people that it doesn't shake them as much.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that it should be. I don't believe that's right. I don't believe the age of the earth is only 6,000 years old. I believe there's been a lot of evolution happening. So I'm pretty much an evolutionary biologist.
Mm.
There's a number. I don't believe they have the church has the right idea about the role of women in the church. But it's like if I was a Catholic woman, it's like, why would I want to fight to be a priest of the Catholic Church who they're a misogynist organization.
Mm.
They treat women like shit. Why do women want to be in an organization that treats them like shit?
Yeah, well, I guess that for them, it has undermined their belief in the movement. And so it would make sense for them to leave.
I guess maybe I'm more like a Jew. Is
Yeah.
there's Jews that are atheists. In fact, maybe they're disproportionately so.
Yeah.
It's like it's more of a ethnicity to me, even though it's not an ethnicity at all.
Yeah.
I'm a cultural Adventist who finds certain lifestyle things and certain ideas about healthy living, and generally
It's more of a cultural kind of thing.
the
Okay.
first, love God and love your neighbor yourself. And that somebody said, I want a religion that I could quote and be done with it standing on one leg.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, we'll quickly do the last couple. If the church eventually adopts, let's just have a bit of a potential sorry, I'm getting a bit slow-minded. It's 4:00 in the morning nearly. If the church eventually adopts your view of Ellen White, valuable, influential, but often mistaken, what makes Adventism distinct from any other Protestant denomination?
Well, it's got a distinct list of fundamental beliefs, and of course, keeping the Sabbath is one, an obvious one. I mean, that's a fact.
But wouldn't you say, though, that your shift, for example, with the Sabbath is that it's not salvific, whereas the Adventist Church teaches that it is salvific. Keeping the Sabbath is salvific. So if they adopted your views, I'm totally fine with someone saying I'm a cultural Adventist, like the Jews can be atheist, or there's a broad number of diverse beliefs that Jews will have. If you're that kind of Adventist, it's fine. But let's both step back for a moment and say that the church does take on your views that she's valuable, influential, often mistaken. Sabbath's no longer salvific. What makes Adventism distinct then from any other Protestant denomination? If you've watered it all down and removed...
It isn't distinct in any significant way.
Say that again. Sorry, it cut out.
It is not distinct. So I would agree with you. Made your point.
And that's probably a good thing. 2 more quick ones. You argue that Adventist eschatology inherited significant problems from Millerism. Is it possible to preserve traditional Adventist end-time theology without preserving Miller's interpretive method?
I think you got to get rid of him and his method, and you can still have some sort of end-time thing, but it'd be much differently, totally different explanation.
I think I can see why traditional Adventists and historicist Adventists fear the progressive Adventist gaining ground, because in many ways the progressive Adventist waters down Adventism into just another Protestant movement. Last question. If a church member reads your books and concludes Don is right, Ellen White was fundamentally mistaken, what theological reason would you give them for remaining an Adventist? So we've talked about the cultural reasons, but what theological reason would you give them?
I wouldn't give them any. I would just say, just take what you might say the more general Christian doctrine of, like when the rich young ruler came and asked Jesus, which is the first and great commandment. Just stick to the first great commandments: love your neighbor and your love God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself, and don't complicate things by getting into all these weeds. You might say both of my books and all my studies has just been getting into the weeds, and really it's of stuff. I'm arguing myself out of a job, so to speak.
Well,
I'm saying all my findings just prove that it's ridiculous to have spent this great amount of time on these minors. I should have worked for Amnesty International or
look, I disagree with you so much on that statement. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I believe your books have offered people, whether you stay personally or not, have offered people a way out of something that inherently seems to pass on a lot of mental health issues to people. A lot of stable, particularly people who I think are critical thinkers, are able to kind of balance all of the variety of cray in there. But what your books, honestly, are in my top 5 all-time books for that I recommend to people to get a clearer understanding of their movement, and for those who leave because of your books, I just think that makes them so valuable because they make people think in a way, like you've got a gift. The way you write stuff is so erudite, articulate, clear. Like I said, by the time I'd finished the preface, I thought, wow, if I was still an Adventist, I'd be leaving right now. So I think they are of great value, and I'm so glad that you didn't go and not write them and focus on other things, because I think because of the mental health issues that come with Adventism, the legalism, the many pitfalls and potholes, your books offer a way past that. And that's so valuable.
Well, I appreciate your evaluation. I would just say, to give an illustration, there's a Copernican view of the universe, and there's a Ptolemaic view of the universe. Is the sun going around the earth, or is the earth going around the sun? I was brought up with the idea that the sun goes around the earth. And then I discovered, no, actually, it's just the reverse. And that's just the way it is, brethren.
That is just the way it is. But if you were Galileo, you were told that if you expressed that view, you were going to be killed with some kind of poison. And so what I'm saying is that for people that are critical thinkers like you and I, we go, oh, okay, so now I just think the earth goes around the sun. So what? I still wake up in the day and it's a nice warm feeling and I'm enjoying the day. It doesn't break us. But for many people in a system where you cannot speak up, you literally will lose your job in the Adventist church if you say you don't believe the earth is 6,000 years old. You cannot say in the Adventist church that you believe that the seal of God is the Holy Spirit. I know pastors who have lost their jobs for saying that. And so I'm just saying that the Adventist church is, when you are aware of its dangers and you realize the sun isn't going around the earth, it's the other way around, you can feel a sense of freedom to it because of that. But the Adventist church is more treats people like Galileo was taught. like Copernicus was treated. When people think and speak outside the box and ask hard questions, they are treated very badly, and it creates cognitive dissonance, mental health issues. So what's that?
I'm glad I didn't stay because I was anticipating all these evils that you're suggesting, and I just said I can see there's too many storm clouds and evils along the way, and
Yeah,
I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to drift. And
yeah. I love that you've said that, because I think you have left in many ways, and your books offer a lot of encouragement. And I just one last time, I just want to encourage people to go to Amazon, download it as a Kindle, Child of the Apocalypse and Father Miller's Daughter. You will discover that these books are incredible, life-changing. And I thank you so much today, Don Casebolt, for coming on the program. And you've been here for 2 hours and 20 minutes, so well done.
oh, I'm exhausted.
I hope you get to have a rest, and I hope we get to keep in touch, and all the best with your health challenges. We really appreciate you taking the time today. Honestly, it's been amazing.
Thank you. And I did send you the contact information on the Australian buddy that I.
You know what's funny is that as we were, I texted him, and as we were chatting just a few minutes ago, he wrote to me. So he has replied while we were chatting. And he says, my friend Don has told me about you, but I'm sure I won't be as interesting as Don. He is an absolute scholar in the study of Ellen G. White and Adventism, but I am happy to help in any way I can. So I will definitely get him on the show as soon as possible. And it's Paul Lee, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thank you for that contact. I will have him on the show in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you interesting experience. And yeah, Paul and I shared mutual interests. Our wives were at the same high school together. We've known each other for 50 years. He's gone through a lot of the transitions that both you and I have gone through as far as that for this church. And he stayed with it longer than I did. And he was an ordained pastor and I wasn't. But
yeah, would have been even harder.
Yeah. And so enjoy your interactions, and thanks for the invitation. And good night and good luck and sweet dreams.
Yes. It's 4 a.m. I'll go and hit the sack, as we say here in Australia. See you, Don. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye.